I was supposed to be healing. Instead, I was watching my husband kiss my sister. Before I take you into that moment and everything that followed, tell me where you watching from. And if you've ever trusted someone who broke your heart, hit subscribe. This one's for us. The cafeteria glass didn't lie. Not like people do. Not like family. It was late afternoon and October's light had that amber softness like everything was being remembered too gently. Leaves scratched against the 12th floor window as if they were trying to get in. The room still smelled faintly of antiseptic and wilted carnations. Someone, probably Brielle, had brought them earlier. Drugstore quality. Discount bin. The thought made my mouth tighten. Nurse Dana had just checked the IV. She adjusted my blanket and said like it was nothing, your husband's downstairs. With your sister. She smiled. Then left. I sat there, the warmth of the morphine retreating like a tide. My stitches ached, my ribs felt raw. But what caught in my chest wasn't pain. It was a pause. A warning. I moved before I thought better of it. Swung my legs off the bed, the hospital gown flapping around my thighs. My feet hit the floor. Cold, grounding. The IV followed, wheels whispering on linoleum as I shuffled toward the window. From here the view overlooked a courtyard lined with thinning trees. Beyond that, the cafeteria. Glass-walled, full of early dinners and late caffeine. But my eyes didn't scan the room. They locked onto one table. There they were, Caleb and Brielle. He was laughing. Not the polite chuckle he gave my coworkers. His real laugh. The one I hadn't heard in weeks. And Brielle tilted forward, her fingers grazing his wrist. Her mouth moved fast, like it always did when she wanted someone to chase her words. I waited for the space between them to widen. It didn't. Instead, his hand reached across the table. Her fingers met his. They laced. The breath left my lungs. She smiled. That same slow cat-like grin she used when she won at Monopoly or seduced a waiter into giving her free dessert. Then he leaned in and kissed her. Not a goodbye kiss. Not a thank you for waiting kiss. A kiss that knew its way around her mouth. I didn't scream, didn't knock on the glass, didn't faint. I just stood there, watching my husband kiss my sister. From the 12th floor. In a gown that didn't close all the way in the back. Pain sharpened beneath my ribs like someone was chiseling into bone. I clutched the IV pole tighter and leaned my forehead against the window. The coolness helped. For 1 second, I imagined I had misunderstood. That it was someone else. That I was seeing things. But Brielle leaned back with that giggle I knew too well, tossing her hair like it was prom night. And Caleb, he looked at her the way he used to look at me. Suddenly, I saw the navy blue dress, the one I gave her last Christmas. I remembered it clearly. She had said, "It's too elegant for my messy life," but she kept it anyway. Apparently, it wasn't too elegant for kissing my husband in public. I didn't know how long I stood there. A minute, 2. It stretched like a bad dream, too long to forget, too short to interrupt. Then my knees buckled. I didn't fall. Just sank slowly into the chair next to the window. The kind meant for visitors. For the ones who come, say kind words, and leave with clean consciences. My conscience wasn't clean, but it was waking up. Fast. 2 nights ago, Caleb had sat right where Nurse Dana had been. He had held my hand gently, almost reverently, and whispered, "I'll be here when you wake up, Lo." I promise, I had believed him. He kissed my forehead, smoothed my hair, tucked the blanket under my feet. "I love you," I had said. He didn't answer right away, just smiled, and then said it back soft, slow, like a man saying it to a memory he didn't want to keep. Now I knew why. That kiss in the cafeteria. It wasn't a new betrayal, it was the tip of something old. A thing that had been growing in shadows while I lay on operating tables and made excuses for why Caleb was suddenly too tired to visit. I looked over at the nightstand. The small ceramic heart dish Brielle gave me 6 months ago, cream-colored, palm-sized, with a little gold trim. I kept my wedding ring in it while they prepped me for surgery. It sat there still, whole, untouched. but I wasn't sure it meant what it used to. I stared at that dish. The one Brielle had wrapped in craft paper and tied with green twine. She gave it to me the day Caleb got the news about my liver. Said something small to remind you of love. I had thanked her. I remember thinking, what a kind, thoughtful sister. Now I wondered what she was really thinking. Was it guilt, was it strategy, or was she just claiming space she thought I'd vacate? The weight of knowing wrapped around me like a second gown, one stitched from silence, shame, and something colder. I didn't cry. That surprised me. What I felt wasn't heartbreak. Not yet. It was something sharper. Like clarity. Like someone had wiped the fog off a mirror and shown me what had been there all along. They thought I was too weak to stand. Too doped up to notice. But I'd seen it. And I was remembering more than just that kiss. Brielle's sudden visits. The way Caleb's phone lit up when she texted late. How he started shaving more often, wearing cologne to check the mailbox. Little things. I just hadn't wanted to believe them. The worst betrayals aren't the ones that blindside you. They're the ones you sense. And still forgive until you can't. A knock startled me. Nurse Dana again peeking in with that cheerful professionalism. "Everything okay?" she asked, already halfway in. "I can bring you something warm to drink. Your husband said you liked chamomile." I looked at her, then at the window. The cafeteria was empty now. They were gone. I nodded. "Chamomile's fine. Thank you." She smiled and disappeared down the hall. I leaned back in the chair, watching the last of the light drain from the sky. They thought I was too weak to see anything. They didn't realize. I'd already started remembering everything. What would you do if the two people closest to you, your partner and your sister, shared a secret like that? Would you confront them, or wait for the right moment to make it unforgettable? Tell me in the comments. I'll be reading. Would you have said something right away, or would you wait, watch, gather proof? Tell me in the comments. This is where the unraveling really began. She brought me flowers. Peonies, my favorite. The irony wasn't lost on me. The same hands that had touched my husband's face just hours before were now smoothing the crinkled edges of floral paper. She stood in the doorway of my hospital room, backlit by the late autumn light, cheeks flushed, like she'd run from the elevator. Or maybe from somewhere else. I thought these might brighten the room. Brielle said, her voice laced with the kind of cheer that tries too hard. They were out of the white ones you like, but pink's close enough, right? She moved toward me before I could answer, setting the bouquet beside the window. Then she turned, plopping herself into the chair by my bed, too close, too soon. Like someone who'd practiced this moment in her head, what to say, where to sit, how to smile. I forced a nod. "They're lovely, thank you." She smiled wider, tilting her head the way she used to in high school when trying to dodge responsibility. It hit me fast, that same tilt. That same look. Back in college, she accidentally dated Kyle Nolan for 3 weeks before realizing he was my ex. Claimed she never made the connection, though he'd been to our house, sat at our table, eaten Dad's overcooked lasagna next to her. I let it go back then. Buried it too deep too fast. Said it didn't matter. Now that memory flared up like an old scar rubbed raw. "So Caleb's downstairs," Brielle offered, eyes flitting to my untouched food tray. "He said to tell you he'll be up in a bit. Something about a call with one of his clients." I nodded again, trying not to react. She didn't need to know I'd already heard that exact excuse getting coffee less than 24 hours ago. Didn't need to know the cafeteria window had become a theater for truth. I just watched her now, her fingers fidgeting with the plastic edge of her visitor's badge, her foot tapping too fast for her words. "You look good," considering, she added, leaning and brushing a strand of hair off my forehead. It took everything in me not to flinch. "Dana said you were asking for me yesterday. I would have stayed longer, but Caleb insisted you needed rest." I tilted my head slightly. That doesn't sound like him." She blinked. "Oh, usually he wants someone in the room. He doesn't like me being alone when I'm groggy." "Oh, well, maybe he just meant, like emotionally, you know, that you'd rest better." Her words came too fast. Too practiced. Too wrong. The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was surgical. I watched her try to fill it, adjusting the flower stems, crossing and uncrossing her legs. Then finally she leaned back and started talking. Remember when we made that big papier-mâché volcano for your 6th grade science fair? Mom was so mad we used all her flour. I gave a half smile. You made it erupt too early, I said flatly. It soaked my project board. She laughed too loud for the moment. You still won though, I didn't answer. But in my head I started a list. Timestamp 3:47 p.m. Brielle enters. Claims Caleb is on a client call. Tone nervous bright. Fidgeting excessive. Proximity uncomfortable. My mind dulled by 4 days of post-op fog now felt sharp, dangerously so. Not from painkillers. From awareness. She kept talking. Childhood memories. High school crushes. How Caleb hated rye whiskey but kept a bottle anyway for guests. Little normal things, like she needed to prove how much she knew. But I wasn't listening anymore, I was cataloging. And I hadn't even looked at my phone yet. I shifted slightly in bed, careful not to pull at the stitches along my right side. The flowers on the tray were beginning to wilt in the heat of the room, though Brielle didn't seem to notice. She just kept talking now about my prom dress from senior year. You know, she said with a nostalgic sigh, you looked like a painting that night. That soft blue, remember Caleb said once that you looked like a, what did he call it? A frozen dream. I turned to look at her then fully. Her eyes darted briefly as if she'd gone one sentence too far. He said that, I asked, keeping my voice steady. She blinked then smiled too fast. Ages ago, I think. Back when you two were still dating, not even engaged yet, he was just being poetic. Poetic. Caleb. The man who once sent me a voice memo to remind me we were out of oat milk. He was many things, but not poetic. I let the silence stretch long enough for her to shift again in her seat. Then came the vibration. My phone. I reached for it slowly, careful not to wince as I leaned sideways. One new message from Caleb. With B, getting coffee. Love you. I stared at the words for a moment. Then I took a screenshot. Timestamp 4:11 p.m. Caleb confirms Brielle is with him. But she's here. I turned the phone so it faced downward on my lap. Lifted my eyes back to Brielle. And caught her. Just for a second, barely a flick of movement, her eyes glanced at my screen before flicking away. Not curious. Not accidental. She was looking for something. There was no guilt in her face. Only calculation. That's when I felt it again, the gap between her and me. The way she tried to close it with memories, small laughs, soft touches on my arm. None of it was for comfort. It was cover. And maybe I wouldn't have noticed a week ago. But once you've seen someone kiss your husband, you don't unsee anything after that. She stood suddenly. I'm gonna grab coffee. Want anything? No thanks, I said, my voice faint. She grabbed her purse, then paused. Glanced around like she was trying to remember something, then smiled and stepped out of the room. But she left her purse. I stared at it. A simple taupe crossbody, the one I'd given her last Christmas. For a moment I wondered if this too was deliberate. A test, a trap. But curiosity has a way of pressing harder than pain. I reached over, hand trembling, not from the incision this time, from everything else. My fingers found the flap. Then the zipper. Inside, nestled between her lip balm and a folded receipt from a hotel in downtown Minneapolis, was Caleb's cufflink. Silver. Oval. Engraved with the letter C. It felt cold in my hand. Too cold for something that had likely been worn recently. I turned it over slowly. The tiny engraved C caught the last slice of afternoon sun coming through the blinds. I didn't cry. I didn't gasp. I just placed it into the small ceramic dish beside my bed, the one Brielle brought the day after my surgery. A heart-shaped thing glazed in soft pink and white. The word breathe was etched in gold near the edge. Back then, I'd thought it was a sweet gesture. Now it felt curated. Preloaded with guilt. I set the cufflink in it gently, like I might set down a shard of glass. The weight of that single object echoed through every moment of the past week. The morning Caleb left early for a run. The lunch Brielle brought in a takeout bag, no receipt, no containers, no evidence of where it came from. The strange silences between them when they were both in the room like two performers waiting for the cue to smile. I looked out the window again, but this time I wasn't looking for them. I was looking for the part of me that had once defended them. Maybe it was just a coincidence. Maybe the cufflink was dropped days ago, picked up by Brielle by accident. Maybe it had been in her purse all along. Maybe. But I remembered something else. 3 months earlier, I'd walked into our guest bathroom, the one Brielle always used when she visited, and noticed the towel rack askew. A cufflink wedged behind it. I'd asked Caleb about it. He said it must have fallen during a business trip. I didn't press him, because when you love someone, you train yourself not to. I reached for my phone again. Opened the Notes app. Started a list, small things. Caleb's cufflink in Brielle's purse. Portland trip, the 2nd of October, 5. Text at 4:11 p.m. She's here, not with him. From dress memory, too specific. Eyeing phone screen. Dana said it's sweet how close they are. I hit save. The list didn't make me feel better, but it made me feel real. The door opened. Brielle came back in 2 paper cups in hand. Decaf chamomile for you, she said, placing one down on the tray like a peace offering. I smiled just enough. Not too much. Thanks, I whispered. She sat back down unbothered. As if nothing had happened. As if nothing ever would, I watched her tuck her hair behind one ear. The same hand that had touched Caleb's face. Maybe it was innocent. But maybe it wasn't the first time she'd slept in his clothes. Brielle asked me to check her email. She said it casually, dropping the request like you'd ask someone to water your plants. I'm waiting on something from my graphic designer, she explained, standing near the window and tying her scarf. Could you open the laptop and see if there's a subject line that says final edit just in case it came through? I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. She slid the laptop off the chair cushion, set it on the rolling tray beside me, and tapped the trackpad. No password prompt. Of course not. Then she was gone, said something about stretching her legs, grabbing another overpriced smoothie from downstairs. The door clicked shut. I stared at the silver screen a moment longer before my fingers moved. My body still hurt. But not like before. Now it was the kind of ache that came with purpose. I opened the email tab like she asked. Nothing stood out. Just the usual clutter: client logos, Canva updates, Pinterest boards. But then I looked closer. Too neat. Folders all lined up. Labels in all caps. No desktop ever looks like that. Not Brielle's, not the girl who once saved her high school poetry under the folder name grilled cheese. That was her thing, hiding the obvious in plain sight. I clicked on design mockups. Inside, more folders. 2021, campaign style guides, and one tucked in the bottom labeled revisions, 2021_2022. I clicked. It was like the silence in the room shifted. Everything became slower, sharper. Inside that folder were image files. JPEGs, PNGs. No logos, no fonts. The first file opened to a photo. Hotel mirror. Brielle's reflection. A towel wrapped around her. The background unmistakably as sweet at the Langham in Chicago. I knew it because it was the hotel Caleb and I had stayed in the year before. On our anniversary. Room 2107. The orchid wallpaper behind the bed gave it away. I scrolled. Another photo. This time Caleb's shoulder visible in the reflection. Bare. His hand holding a champagne flute tilted just slightly toward her. The timestamp read the 8th of April 2022. I blinked. Held my breath. That weekend, Caleb told me he had a work summit. Said the hotel was overbooked, so he'd be staying with a colleague in the suburbs. I had sent him a card. Had a bottle of wine waiting when he returned. My finger moved again, slower this time. The next file was a video. Just 5 seconds. Brielle in the navy dress I gave her. Sitting at the edge of the bed. Soft jazz playing in the background. Caleb's voice off camera, You gonna take that off for me now? Then static. Then the clip ended. I didn't blink for a long time. Just watched the screen go dark. The reflection of my own face faint in the black. No tears, no outburst. Just the sound of my own breath measured and steady, like a nurse had coached me through it. I didn't need to replay the clip. The voice, the angle, the intimacy of it, none of it required a second glance. I reached for the drawer beside my bed. The USB drive I kept for personal files, photos of our dog that passed last year, tax forms, a half-written letter to my mother was still tucked inside my toiletry pouch. I had brought it from home, thinking I might organize my desktop while recovering. Now I had another use for it. My fingers moved with a clarity I hadn't felt in days. Pain was there but quiet, like my body knew this mattered more. I inserted the drive. Opened a new folder. May, lab, results boring. Unassuming. Something Brielle would never open. Then I dragged. All the files. The photos, the video, the folder structure. Even the recent items logged just in case. I right-clicked the USB and selected eject. Waited for the green checkmark. Then deleted the revisions. 2021_2022 folder from the desktop. Emptied the trash. Closed the laptop. Clicked the lid shut. That was all. Just 10 minutes. Enough time to break something clean and deep. I lay back in bed, slowly letting the stiffness in my side anchor me. The ceramic heart dish beside me caught the afternoon light again. Inside it now sat the silver cufflink. Next to it, quiet, still unaware, was the tiny USB drive, its plastic shell barely touching the ceramic edge. I stared at the two of them, side by side. One she probably didn't know she left behind. One she'd handed me freely. I picked up my phone and opened the Notes app. Typed slowly. Vitals recovered revisions folder. Lingham Suite, the 8th of April. Caleb's voice on video, navy dress, equals, match. Deleted local trace. USB now hidden in bedside kit. I reread each line. Not for confirmation, but to remind myself it had actually happened. Because betrayal doesn't always explode. Sometimes it just lands. And you breathe through it like you're watching someone else's life fall apart. The door eased open. I didn't flinch. I'd already folded the blanket higher over my lap, placed the laptop neatly on the chair, and adjusted the tray to make it look untouched. Brielle stepped in holding a smoothie. Mango ginger. Of course. Her go-to when she wanted to look like she cared about wellness. She smiled too wide. Everything okay? She asked, as if I might have forgotten how to breathe in her absence. I nodded. Checked your email, I said evenly. Nothing from your designer yet. She walked over, handed me the smoothie. Then looked down at her laptop like it was nothing but a screen of fonts and mock-ups. Thanks, she said, tucking her hair behind one ear. Same hand that once reached for my hand across a playground fence. Same hand that now pressed lightly against a keyboard hiding hotel rooms and videos and the voice of the man she called her brother-in-law. I sipped the smoothie. Cool. Sharp. Too sweet. She started talking about a home decor account she'd followed on Instagram. Neutrals, woven textures. Plans for her next apartment. I nodded in the right places. Let her words float in and out like elevator music. My body stayed still, but my mind, it was building something. Not rage, not sadness, just quiet construction. Steel beams made of facts. Windows of evidence. A foundation she couldn't see, but one she would feel eventually. As she kept talking, I looked at her mouth. How it curved when she lied. How it tightened when she almost caught herself revealing too much. I wondered if she knew I was watching for those cracks now. If she realized I'd stopped believing in her voice. But I smiled. Tilted my head. Played the sister part I was supposed to. When she stood to stretch, the cuff of her cardigan slipped back. I saw the faintest purple mark along her collarbone. A shadow of something pressed too hard too recently. I said nothing. Just watched. And when she picked up her laptop and walked out again, I let the silence settle over everything. I reached for the ceramic heart dish one more time. The USB drive still nestled beside the cufflink. 2 secrets. 2 choices. I didn't know what hurt more. What I saw on screen, or how easily I could act like I hadn't seen it. If someone handed you the password to their betrayal, would you look? Or would you rather not know? Drop a yes or a no below. Let's see how many of us would open the folder. Some people explode when they're hurt. Others plan. Would you have said something or stayed silent until you were ready to destroy them? The body was healing, but my mind was on fire. I had traded the antiseptic smell of the hospital for eucalyptus and banana bread. Brielle's doing, of course. She said the house needed warmth. I thought it needed walls that could talk back. The fireplace crackled behind me as I sank into the sectional. Wool blanket draped over my legs. Hot tea untouched on the coaster. I stared at the flames, but I wasn't thinking of comfort. I was thinking of Caleb's briefcase. The one he'd left by the hallway bench like he always did, never locked. He assumed convenience was safety, and he assumed I was still drowsy from the meds. That morning I'd asked him for my charger. Said I thought it was in his bag. He smiled the same tight smile he used when he closed deals. Sure. You really shouldn't be moving around yet, he said, disappearing into the bedroom. While he bent down to unzip the side pocket, I noted the second compartment still open, the one with printed spreadsheets and an envelope marked Q4 projections. I didn't need it now, but I would. Once the front door clicked shut behind him, I moved faster than I had in days. I pulled the envelope out, scanned everything with my phone, page by page. Into my vitals folder now tucked inside an iCloud shell only I could access. The painkillers had worn off days ago. What remained was clarity. Brielle was out buying groceries. I knew that because she made a point to say it loudly twice. Once to Caleb. Once to me. As if declaring helpfulness made her presence less suffocating. While she was gone, I opened the shared laptop on the kitchen counter. The one we used for Netflix and travel bookings. I opened Safari. Logged into the admin panel I'd quietly installed back in April when Caleb said our internet was acting laggy. Then I installed a keystroke logger. Silent. Undetectable. Legal gray zone, yes. But I wasn't playing checkers anymore. At 2:11 p.m. I street-arted the Zoom call with Darren Roth. He'd been my father's lawyer. Now semi-retired. But when I texted him the words "need asset guidance," he replied in 5 minutes flat. His face filled my screen, white hair, argyle sweater, voice like dry leaves. Lauren, I hoped I'd never see you under these terms. I didn't cry, didn't offer small talk. I need to freeze everything tied to Halcyon Equity, I said. Our accounts. Our real estate. My name's still on the original papers. He nodded slowly, and Caleb doesn't know I know. He leaned back. That's good. For now. I sent him the PDFs I'd scanned. He opened them, nodded again. This is enough to start a freeze protocol. Quietly. You'll need more if you want full removal authority. I will, I said. Any other parties involved? I hesitated. My sister. He didn't blink. He just said, keep your phone close. Document everything. And Lauren, don't give them a reason to speed up whatever they're planning. By the time Caleb returned with a plastic bag from the pharmacy and his usual practiced concern, I was already deep into the second layer of planning. I had repositioned the throw pillow beside me, slightly angled just enough to hide the small voice recorder tucked inside. A simple model, old but effective, used once to record notes from therapy sessions. It now had a different purpose. He kissed the top of my head gently. You feeling okay? His voice had that subtle drawl he used when trying to seem relaxed. I'm better, I replied, short. Honest enough. He took off his coat and moved around the kitchen with ease, like the home was still his sanctuary. Like the woman watching him hadn't seen him undress her sister in a hotel suite a state away. Brielle returned not long after. The front door opened with too much cheer. Arms full of grocery bags, cheeks flushed with the kind of energy you only get when you're hiding something big and think you're getting away with it. She walked into the living room, unloading cans, humming a little. A song from when we were kids, Fleetwood Mac maybe. One she knew I'd recognize. Banana bread, she chirped, holding up the overripe bananas like a prize. For later, your favorite. I smiled. The tight kind. She walked over, sat beside me on the edge of the couch. Too close. You're so strong, she whispered, brushing my arm. And I felt it again, that distance between gesture and truth. The performance of sisterhood. The lie she was living so loudly it rang in every corner of this house. Later that afternoon, I asked to rest. Told them the fatigue was back. I knew they'd want to talk alone. I left the recorder running. Through my bedroom door, I heard drawers open, the fridge hum soft murmurs. And then, I heard her voice. Clear, intimate. She's still drugged up, we've got time. A pause. Then, Caleb's voice. Just a couple more weeks. Then we'll talk to her, gently. Another silence. One I knew well, the kind when two people look at each other too long. The kind that comes right before they make a plan and assume no one's watching. I didn't cry. I didn't shake. I pulled my phone from under the pillow. Opened voice memos. Uploaded the audio. I saved it under one word: sweet talk. Wave. That night, as the fireplace softened the shadows across the living room and Caleb and Brielle washed dishes in the kitchen like some twisted imitation of family, I stared into the flames again. I wasn't broken. I wasn't recovering, I was collecting. That night I didn't sleep. Not from pain, but from awareness. The kind that hums under your skin when you know something sacred has been turned into strategy and you're the only one holding both the memory and the weapon. Caleb stayed in the guest room. He said he didn't want to disturb my rest. I let him think he was being noble. Brielle left her banana bread on the counter wrapped in parchment like a peace offering. I didn't touch it, didn't even unwrap it. Instead, I pulled out the ceramic heart dish she'd given me last Christmas. It sat beside my bed like it always had. Inside now was the cufflink I found, and the flash drive, holding the photos. And a folded piece of paper, Caleb's last itinerary to Portland. The dish was filling up, proof piece by piece. At 2:03 a.m., I opened my notes app. Started a new file under vitals. Typed 2 sentences: he thinks I'm weak, she thinks I'm blind. Then I opened the voice memo again. Listen not for the words, but for the tone behind them. They were planning a soft landing. An exit coded in kindness. One where they'd cry, say things like it just happened, and expect me to nod along like some broken wife with no sense of power. But I was building the cliff. And they wouldn't see the edge until it was too late. Would you wait for more proof, or was that enough for you to burn everything down? Comment below, wait or strike. Let's see how many of us would still play nice. Ever had to choose between your career and your conscience? What would you do if someone betrayed both? Let me show you what I did. Grace Lindholm believed in 2 things: clean design and clean morals. She never said it outright, but you could feel it in the way she refused to sugarcoat critiques, the way she paused before accepting handshakes, and the way she once told me over a glass of Pinot, "I'd rather walk away with nothing than share a win with someone I don't trust." I remembered that line now as I sat across from her in the corner booth of Cafe Irvani in St. Paul. The late autumn sun filtered through wide glass panes, making everything look more honest than it was. I wore a thick cashmere scarf and dark sunglasses. Not to hide, just to remind myself I was still in control. Grace arrived 10 minutes early like always. She slid into the booth across from me, set her leather bag beside her, and gave me that clean, steady look she was known for. "Lauren," she said, voice level. "You okay?" I could have lied. But what was the point of choosing this meeting, this moment, if I wasn't going to use it well? "No," I said softly. "But I will be." I reached into my tote, pulled out a thin folder. No dramatics. Just a neat stack of screenshots, expense records, and emails. Dates circled. Names highlighted. Timestamps aligned. I didn't look at her while she read. I watched the way her fingers paused over one receipt from the Langham in Chicago. She didn't blink at the selfie Caleb's arm draped around Brielle's shoulder. She blinked at the line item billed to our joint client account. When she looked up, her expression hadn't changed, just her jaw tightened. "You're showing me this," she said, because he's been representing our firm, because he's been smiling in meetings while hiding this. Because I'd like to shift the contract fully under my name as originally intended." Grace leaned back. "I don't work with liars," she said. "Especially ones who fake loyalty for optics." I felt my chest loosen. Not with relief. With recognition. She saw it now too, all of it. I'd already filed the paperwork for my own LLC. It wasn't a rash decision. I'd spent the past week mapping it out between pain meds and water breaks names, contact silent capital. The name was Simple River North Advisory. Quiet. Precise. Something that didn't scream revenge, but wouldn't be forgotten. Grace signed the amendment right there in the booth. Her signature was clean, no hesitation. "That's the only copy I brought," I said, folding the folder. I didn't want to make it feel like a power move. "It's not," she replied, sipping her espresso. "It's a survival move. And you've always played the long game." I nodded. She wasn't wrong. By sundown that same day, Darren had the contract shift logged and certified. We initiated the digital reroute of all internal communications. One click. Caleb no longer had access to client dashboards. By midnight, his credentials were marked inactive. Meanwhile, across town, Brielle texted me, "Hey love, I've confirmed I can attend the charity gala in your place. You need rest. I'll wear the navy satin, promise not to embarrass us." I didn't answer. I simply forwarded it to my notes app, titled the entry "When She Thought She Was Me." While she was picking earrings, I was picking locks on the last pieces of my professional life he thought he owned. I met 2 other clients that week, quiet lunches, no fanfare. I didn't tell them why I was stepping in solo. They didn't ask. But I saw it in their eyes, respect. Maybe even relief. That Friday evening, Darren called me just as the sun dipped below the oaks lining our backyard. "Everything's locked," he said. "Access suspended, financials frozen. The firm's yours on paper and in practice." I thanked him quietly. Then I opened the shared inbox on the company portal. It was almost satisfying watching the system respond in real time. First 1 unread message. Then 3. Then 7. The 8th had the subject line, "Why can't I log in?" From Caleb's personal email. I didn't open it. I just stared at the line. And then I smiled. He was sitting somewhere, maybe in our kitchen, maybe at that coffee shop he always pretended to work from, refreshing, resetting, wondering if the system was down. If it was a glitch. It wasn't. This was no accident. No tech hiccup. This was intentional. Calculated. He'd built the narrative that I was the quiet wife. The one who handled the books, who supported from the back. So I let him hold it, let him play CEO. Let him present pitch decks, I wrote ideas, I planted strategy, I built. But now, he thought I'd let him keep the company. I was just letting him hold it for now. What hurts more, being betrayed in love or in business? Drop for love, for business. I didn't scream, I streamed. The morning air was thin and cold, but inside the house it smelled of lemon cake and effort. Brielle had lit a spiced candle. Caleb brought in fresh croissants from the bakery down the street. Everything was carefully staged. Recovery brunch, they called it. An excuse to gather a few close friends, sip lukewarm coffee, and pretend nothing was cracked beneath the surface. But I knew something had broken that morning. A fine split had appeared down the side of the small ceramic heart dish by my nightstand. The same one Brielle had given me the Christmas after my diagnosis. It cracked clean down the center. I didn't throw it away, I kept it. Like proof. Grace arrived first. Sharp blazer. Dark jeans. No makeup. She greeted me like someone who knew exactly what the day was about. Then came Tanya, then Aunt Marianne, then Mark, Caleb's older brother, polite and always slightly removed. I wore black. Not for mourning. For clarity. They all settled into the living room, balancing paper plates and half smiles. Brielle hovered. She looked good. A little too good. Caleb poured coffee. His voice was steady, eyes darting occasionally toward me. And then I said it soft, almost polite. Why don't you two share your news? Heads turned. Brielle's cheeks lifted in a strained smile. Oh, I mean it's not. She looked at Caleb. He blinked. Hesitated. I watched them wobble. The house was silent, but my pulse was loud. Let me help, I said. I walked over to the television, lifted the remote, and tapped the input. My laptop screen blinked onto the television. At first it was just a folder, labeled for when I'm ready. I opened it. The first photo. A hotel hallway. Caleb's arm around Brielle. Chicago timestamp. The next Brielle in the navy dress. The one I gave her. Then a video. Caleb's voice. You look better in her things. Then the audio. The room fell still. She's still drugged up. We've got time. Just a couple more weeks. Then we'll talk to her. Gently. Gasps. A fork dropped. Mark exhaled loudly and rubbed his face. I didn't say a word. I just let the room sit in that sound. Let them all hear how careful betrayal could sound like love. Soft-spoken, whispered. Almost tender. Caleb reached forward, maybe to turn off the television. I stopped him with just a look. There's more. The next slide appeared. A scanned document. My signature, Darren's process. A legal transfer of all partnership assets to my name. Then a log of Caleb's expenses on the company card. Most of them matched the hotel stays in Chicago, Portland, and one odd trip to Vancouver. Grace stood. She wasn't the kind to raise her voice, so when she said, "You're done, both of you," it felt like a door slamming shut. Tanya looked stunned. Aunt Marianne murmured a prayer under her breath. Mark just nodded slowly, like someone who'd seen this storm coming for a while and knew now it had finally landed. Brielle sat down, hands shaking. Her eyes rimmed in disbelief, not sorrow. Not guilt. Just disbelief that the story wasn't going her way. Caleb tried to speak. You don't understand. I clicked one more time. The screen went black. Presentation over. Then I turned to the room. Some of you already suspected, some of you didn't, and some of you chose not to look too closely. That's fine. I didn't bring you here to punish anyone. I just wanted you to hear it from them, in their own words. The ceramic dish sat quietly on the mantel. The crack glinted in the morning sun. I walked to the front door. You're all welcome to stay for cake. Except for them. I opened the door. Brielle didn't move. Neither did Caleb. The wind outside shook the last of the maple leaves off their branches. Inside, the silence was its own kind of ceremony. Grace was the first to step forward. She placed her hand on my shoulder, light but steady. You don't need to explain anything, she whispered. They did it for you. Caleb's jaw clenched. He looked around the room, scanning for an ally. Mark met his eyes, but didn't speak. Tanya refused to look at either of them. Brielle finally stood, brushing invisible crumbs from her lap. Old habit. She always tried to tidy messes she couldn't control. I was going to tell you, she said, voice small. We were waiting for the right time. I didn't respond. I didn't owe her the dignity of a response. Instead, I turned to the rest of the room. And with a quiet breath, I said, this isn't revenge. This is revelation. They wrote the story. I just read it out loud. It was enough. More than enough. Caleb finally reached for his coat. Brielle hesitated, one last glance at the ceramic dish on the mantel. It had cracked clean through the center. I'd glued it back that morning, but didn't hide the fracture. Some breaks aren't meant to disappear. They're meant to show how something almost held until it couldn't. They left without another word. I closed the door behind them. The room exhaled. Later that night, I walked out to the back porch. Minnesota nights get quiet in November. The kind of quiet that doesn't ask anything of you. I sat with a cup of tea, opened my phone, and tapped the file titled Vitals. One last note. I didn't burn it all down. I just stopped pretending there wasn't smoke. And for the first time in months, I felt warm. Do you think I went too far, or not far enough? Comment below, number 1, fair, number 2, too far, and tell me your story. I'll be reading.